The panel that we are about to commence on will speak to national and global frameworks. And we chose the Sustainable Development Goals as well as the National Development Plan to actually look at the various objectives of those two frameworks, looking at things like eradicating poverty, looking at, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, the end of poverty, inequality, and to protect the planet. While our NDP is actually looking at plans, what are we actually going to do, the objectives in terms of the NDP sets out, and rather ambitious goals to, again, reduce poverty, economic growth, economic transformation, but we also talk about job creation. I'm going to start by asking Kathy, okay, I'm going to ask quickly and just look at the link between the Sustainable Development Goals, the National Development Plan, and the Financial Sector Code. How do we bring these frameworks together and then implement financial education? Can you shed some light on the links between these three that we have?
Yes, thanks, Lyndwill. I mean, the short answer is that they are very aligned, but I know you said if I'm over time, you'll sing, so I'll keep going because I like that first song. Just to say that the National Development Plan was actually launched 3 years prior to the Sustainable Development Goals, so it preceded it. It was done while the Sustainable Development Goals were still in development, and yet there is significant overlap between them. So although the National Development Plan is obviously local and South African based, and the Sustainable Development Goals are global, both of them have targets, and a lot of similar ones, for 2030. So they've got the same timeline. And also when the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation and the UN Development Programme looked at the alignment between the two, they found that 74% of the SDG targets were actually covered in the NDP. So the vast majority. And the ones that weren't covered in the NDP were often covered in South African sectoral plans. And here you can look at financial sector and other sector plans that cover the rest of those. So yes, there is significant overlap, which is good news for companies that are trying to align to these things. And then to your second question, which was around how are companies aligning to these global and local frameworks. So at Trialogue, we do research every year with large South African companies. And when we last asked this question, which was in 2020, we've asked it again this year, but I don't have the results yet, unfortunately. But in 2020, 59% of the large companies that we surveyed said that they aligned to the SDGs and included those in their overall company strategy, which was a slightly higher percentage than, I think it was around 52 or 54% that said the same thing for the NDP. So we've got over half of companies saying they align. We then asked companies, and on average they identify about 6 SDGs that they align with. We then asked to what degree they use the indicators, which is the kind of level down from the targets. And fewer than half of companies are actually using the indicators. So I'm interested to see if there has been progress this year, but on the face of it, it seems that companies are acknowledging these frameworks, but maybe at a superficial level, certainly then. And anecdotally, what we'd say at Trialogue is we see companies not really doing anything different because of the frameworks. So what most companies and organizations do is kind of retroactively fit what they're already doing and their existing programs and products and services to the SDGs or the NDP clusters. So it's not making them change anything really that they do. And you know, to make a real difference, I think companies really need to look at their product and service mix, their business models. You know, it's beyond CFE and CSI. It's really looking at the business model of companies and how does the company itself and what it does contribute to those SDGs. And this actually requires trade-offs, and it needs to happen at a board level. You know, if you're looking at financial services, you know, you've got to look at debt, you've got to look at some of the negative impacts that can be had, and there are trade-offs required. And we think some companies are starting to look at this and to incorporate it into core strategy. But on the whole, we think it's more retroactively fitted to what they're already doing. So we haven't seen organizations really change what they're doing based on these national or local frameworks.
So basically what you're saying is they're just ticking the boxes.
Well, they're aligning, and I think that's important. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to contribute to those local and national goals. But to make a real difference, companies really need to look at their business models.
Yeah.
And that takes a whole lot more effort and a lot more trade-offs.
Yeah, definitely, because the National Development Plan speaks to business and the public and private sector doing long-term investment into these kind of development of the goals, but also the implementation of the goals. So if you first just align what you're doing to the goals, then you actually putting the cart before the horse. So development should start first, and thereafter you should actually do the implementation. Which brings me to the actual impact that this will then have, because if they're doing things other way around, Ruth, in terms of the impact, and we've seen in the previous presentations the impact that your programs have had, but some of them are reach and some of them are qualitative impact. How do we assess those two? Which ones comes first? Because previously we also spoke about reach is not important anymore. We need to have the impact. But impact is long-term. So if we're going to develop these plans, what kind of measurement are we looking at here? And how do we then take reach versus impact? Because we know that politicians like numbers. So when we want to say this thing was successful, we've reached 30,000 people, is that a measurement of success? Or do you think we should go more qualitative?
Yes, the eternally prevalent question that faces us in this space. But I think that's exactly why I felt that we needed to stop at 10 years and reflect. Because we have that continual challenge, but we have had a great privilege within the foundation to not be pressurized only about reach. But then, as was said earlier, so you might have great impact with a few people. Is it making a national impact? So that tension remains there, and I think that brings Kathy's point to light. Until all organizations who have the capacity, the capability to fund what needs to happen, until they align that completely to their core strategic objectives, only then will we have the ability to scale the programs and achieve the significant reach that's going to move the dial. So we've spent the first 10 years focusing on making sure that we have quality education. And I think Coco did an excellent job in terms of demonstrating how we go about making sure it's not just a workshop and you get a T-shirt, maybe have lunch and off you go. And then and that's how we put the program together. I have to say to Kathy, I got very excited about the SDGs because we came into existence in order to support the National Development Plan. That's part of what ASISA does. We exist to work alongside of government to help to bring about the change that's required and to be relevant in our society. So, and for me, that's what the ASISA Foundation was founded to achieve. And it was really a retrofit when you look at the SDGs, and it was so exciting for me. My trustees kept saying, don't choose many SDGs, just a few so that you could do it. By now, I think we've still got 9 out of the 9 or 11 out of the 17, because we can demonstrate that what we do, we're continually trying to refine and do things differently to bring about the impact, but we most definitely link it to the sub-indicators. So yes, quality education, that is our driving force, but for whom? To whom? Is it accessible? Is it relevant? Is it reaching young people, older people? Is it targeted in a way that they understand, that they can apply and absorb? So I could be here the whole day and we've already run out of time, so I won't say anything more.
Must I start singing?
You did already. But the point is, I think we are in a wonderful space where we are all considering how what we do is contributing into the SDG. We stand proudly. I'm on this journey, how to take all these stories and then connect them to which specific SDG is another story. But I think also, to answer your question, it's always going to be about, so you have impact, but are you reaching enough? And we do need to scale, and that's why we are here. We're trying to validate what we do, we're trying to highlight the need, and we're trying to, as I said at the beginning, inspire more collaboration so that we keep doing the reach. You know, every little bit counts, that ripple effect, and we aim to do more.
I think the challenge always we have is we reach, but we don't track. So while we know that we've reached X amount of people, we're not sure whether they've actually become financially capable. We know that they're financially literate. And then, of course, the next step is, are they financially well? And all these terminologies that keep on coming out, they sometimes confuse us because in some countries they use them interchangeably. But I think it's important that we now look at that impact and that actual reach. Now, how do we take the next step? Our recent survey actually looked at capability. And while we saw that a lot of South Africans are becoming financially literate, it just shows there's not a lot of capability because all we're doing is we're giving information. And I think here, the issues that you're taking forward in terms of your projects, that although your numbers might be small in some instances, there's a period of time that you spend with them. So coming back to the issue of the SDGs and obviously from Kathy's point and what you said about impact, Nosizwe, sorry, this is Nosizwe. In terms of business, right? So how important would you think financial literacy or financial education is then for business? And how do we know how important is it? Because from Kathy's point is they got to build first, they got to plan first, and then look at the SDGs, and then obviously look at the implementation. They need to know how are we going to measure this? Is it just reach or impact? So how important, from your point of view, from business, how important is financial literacy in the business model then? Is it important at all? Or are we only looking at the bottom line?
Sure, that's a very tough question. But I mean, I think we all know that business, the primary motive there is a profit motive. Having said that, I think that, I thank the heavens anyway that more and more we have to link, developmental imperatives to to that profit motive. And I think that realization of linking the two, and it's coming to the fore in a very real way now with ESGs, and how ESG has come to the forefront, and how there's a lot of that link between the business and the business models, but then also ESGs, and how it is that those are more and more, whether it's from investors are wanting to know what is actually the investment that you're making, for example, in the social. Right? And so companies more and more are looking not only at the return on investment just only from a financial point of view, but also for the social return on investment in terms of what is being done in communities. So yes, there'll always be that clash, that is the fact, between the developmental imperative and the profit motive. However, I think that more enlightened business people actually realize that the two are inextricably linked. I'll give you a short story in terms of the Sanlam Foundation. When I first arrived in 2020, it's safe to say that M&E wasn't a thing. Even just in terms of the SDGs, in terms of the National Development Plan, and not only with ourselves as the foundation, but also with our implementing partners. And I think Ruth and others will attest that we've really gone on a journey together in terms of making SDGs and just monitoring and evaluation in general, through the NDP and the SDGs, part and parcel of what it is that we do. So it's not just a business thing, I would say. I think that generally speaking, all of us, whether we are in development spaces like foundations, for a long time, foundations were about compliance only. So for example, the Sanlam Foundation is the biggest single contributor towards the BBBE scorecard of the Sanlam Group. And we contribute towards CFE, but also enterprise supply development and socioeconomic development. But obviously, what a waste to only be focusing on the compliance. Why not do compliance and the social return on investment and making measurable impact in communities? And I think that is the story. And ironically, it's important to show that once that commitment is made, from a developmental perspective, it actually also has a good effect on the bottom line. And so it's actually in everybody's favor, actually, to link the two. People think that they're mutually exclusive, the developmental imperative and the profit motive, but actually they're not.